You will be amazed to hear the story of a 90-year-old woman with 200 children. This is such an incredible incident that will shake the heart. A righteous elder, who had spent most of his life in solitude, lived in a village where he had no close relatives. The righteous servants of Allah, whose only purpose in life is to serve people and get close to Allah, always think well of others. But there are some people in the world who show their hearts to these righteous servants without any reason. A similar incident happened to this elder. The behavior of some people in the village annoyed him so much that he decided to leave his place. The only thought in his heart was that when a person does not find peace in any place, he should change his path. He took the name of Allah and started the journey, his tongue silent and his heart busy in the remembrance of Allah. This journey was an extraordinary test. The path was long and difficult, and he did not see the destination. There was only one hope in his heart, and that was from Allah himself. They wondered why people hurt each other. Why do the words of our language pierce someone's heart? But this was a good servant of Allah. There was no malice, envy, or grudge in his heart for anyone. Despite suffering, his lips did not close to prayer. On the way, a strange settlement appeared. Looking at this strange settlement, the elder decided that this was the place to stay. Perhaps this was the destination appointed by Allah, where a new story of his journey was to begin. His heart testified, "Stop here, maybe here you will find medicine for the pain." It was nighttime and silence reigned everywhere. There was no man, not even the shadow of a human being. There was only a dense tree that looked like a giant landscape in the dim light of the moon. It seemed as if the tree itself was calling him to its shelter. The elder sat down under it. Suddenly, a strong and cool breeze blew. A fragrance spread with this breeze, which perfumed the heart and mind. Then an apple fell from the tree. This was surprising because the tree was not an apple tree. It was a special gift from Allah. The elder picked the apple, thanked him, and ate it, and became absorbed in the remembrance of Allah. The whole night passed in the remembrance of Allah, and when the morning light began to spread, it was as if it were giving the good news of a new life. But there were some wounds inside the heart that were still fresh. Sometimes a person's heart breaks in such a way that it takes time to repair it. Sometimes words can hurt deeper than a sword. That is why the elder always taught to speak softly and lovingly. The people of Allah are in love with Allah, unconcerned with the things of the world, and forgiving of the behavior of humans. But when it comes to themselves, their hearts are also human. They were trying to forget the events that happened in the previous village, but some things hurt the heart, even if a person forgives them. Closing their eyes, they kept remembering Allah, turning the beads of the tasbih in their hands. In the meantime, some people passed by and their eyes fell on the elder. They started looking at him strangely, as if he were seeing something amazing. And this surprise was not without reason. The elder, whom people thought was an ordinary person, was actually 81 years old. But there was such a radiance and calmness on his face that would have surprised anyone. And there was such a radiance on his face that the onlookers were amazed and shocked. At such an age, the back usually bends, the body becomes weak, and the person looks helpless. The biggest thing is that the face is filled with wrinkles, but his face was such that no one could say that he was over 80 years old. It is all a matter of the heart. Those faces are always bright whose hearts are pure and intentions are pure. Indeed, good deeds and pure intentions have a special effect on a person's personality. And this was the reason why even at the age of 80, his face looked young and beautiful. His personality was such that people were amazed. The people who were there started talking among themselves. They were wondering who this elder was, who was seen in this village for the first time today. Unfortunately, most of them were rude, who did not know how to respect elders. But there was also a kind-hearted person among them who smiled at the elder and came forward and sat down next to him. That kind-hearted person started saying, Baba, who are you? Where have you come from? I have never seen you here before today." The man of Allah calmly replied, "Son, I have come from a village some distance from here." He then asked, "Do you have any relatives here? Have you come to see anyone? If so, why are you sitting here under the tree? Come, I will take you there." The man of Allah replied softly, "No, I do not have any relatives here, nor have I come on any special business." Hearing this, the man fell silent. Because he was a wise man and knew that it was not appropriate to be too assertive, he said, "Baba, if you want to stay here, then definitely stay. You are our guest. I will bring you food." Saying this, he left from there. Allah's servant again became busy in his remembrance. In the same village, there lived a 90-year-old old woman. Her beauty was unparalleled, but she was modest and shy, so she did not come in front of anyone like that. She always kept to her own work. And Allah's servants also have such pure eyes. Now the tree under which Allah's servant was sitting was a special place, and this incident was about to begin a new story. Right in front of the tree was the house of this old woman. Allah's servant was sitting with his eyes downcast and busy in remembrance, when suddenly that good person came with bread. Allah's servant prayed for him and ate the bread while thanking Allah Almighty. He was the only person who was worrying about him, while the rest of the villagers would pass by just by looking at him. They did not ask for food or water. The people of this village were immersed in arrogance and pride. They thought that they were in a high position. Helping someone was a difficult task for them, especially feeding a hungry beggar was like a curse to their soul. They did not know the true meaning of goodness. Thieves intoxicated with wealth, far from respecting the man of Allah, they would pass by him thinking him to be just an old beggar. These people tried many times to make the man of Allah leave this village. The purpose of their rudeness and harsh language was to make the man of Allah leave this place with a heavy heart. But it could not be done. The man of Allah had patience and love for the pleasure of Allah in his heart, so he would ignore their words every time. While most of the people of the village were so rude and selfish, that good man would come to the man of Allah every day. He would take care of their food and drink and talk to them lovingly. The man of Allah would also talk to him happily. This man would feel as if he were his son. The righteous servants of Allah never think for themselves. Whatever they do for the pleasure and happiness of Allah. This was the reason why the people of Allah used to pray for this righteous person, and he would be happy in his service. This was the beginning of a special relationship between the two of them, which included the pleasure and love of Allah. No matter how much a person tried to break these righteous servants of Allah, they would never curse anyone. An old woman lived in the house opposite the tree under which the people of Allah used to sit. You saw that the old woman would leave her work, quickly return home, neither talk to anyone unnecessarily nor waste time like other women. The people of Allah also saw that the women of the village treated this old woman very badly. They would gossip about her and try their best to defame her. But the old woman remained silent. She never defended herself nor replied to their words. All this was clearly visible from where the people of Allah used to sit. One night, a very heavy rain started, and with the rain, a strong wind began to blow. It seemed like a storm of doomsday that would blow everything away. Everyone hid in their homes, but in fear, no one came to help each other. The man of Allah raised his hands to the sky and began to pray. He was praying for those who had treated him worse than animals. The wind was blowing hard on everyone's faces, and everyone was afraid for his life. A man who respected the man of Allah very much came near him and said, "Hazrat, you should sit somewhere else. This place is not safe." But the man of Allah calmly replied, "Nothing will happen to me." And indeed, the whole night that wind and the torrential rain kept the villagers shaken, but the man of Allah was busy in his worship. Because of his prayer, the storm ended in the morning. Instead of being grateful, the villagers were silent. But the man of Allah did not do all this for show. He did his deeds only for the pleasure of Allah, and that was his true greatness. The night was very terrible. He had complete faith in the Lord, but the villagers had no idea that if the people of Allah had not prayed and stopped the storm, everything would have been destroyed and the entire village would have been overturned. He fought the storm all night, and no one even knew. But those oblivious people were unable to understand who the one who saved their village was. After the prayer, he began to rest for a while. When he woke up, he used the water for ablution that the good man had already filled for him. He saw that you were awake, so he came to you smiling and said, "I have brought you breakfast." You refused, but succumbed to his love and coercion and had breakfast. You prayed for him a lot. Then he said, "I am going to the city on some work. Take care of yourself." He started reciting the tasbih again. The villagers became busy with their work. Suddenly, a panicked voice reached your ears. It was an old woman who had come out of her house in a panic. She called out to a man, "Son, just listen to me." But instead of listening, the man scolded him and said, "I'm not going to listen to anything you say. I don't know what new trick you will try now." The man of Allah heard all this while reciting tasbih and stopped. You thought, what kind of strange tone is this, treating a woman like this? You had an idea of the rude behavior of the villagers, but you were shocked to see this scene. The old woman was asking for help from everywhere, but everyone was looking at her as if she had a contagious disease. When she was disappointed from all sides, the woman started crying. Then her eyes fell on you. She knew that asking you for help would not seem appropriate, but compulsion makes a person do everything. She walked up to you and said in a low voice, "Can you help me? You are a respectable and good person. I don't want to hurt you, but who should I ask for help from?" The man of God replied softly, "Yes, daughter, tell me. If I can, I will definitely help you." She hesitated and said, The old woman said, "I was lighting a fire to bake bread, but I saw that the wood was wet. Now how can I bake bread in the oven? This is my well. This is how I earn money. Last night's heavy rain soaked all the wood." The man of God said, "Come on, let's go inside and see. Are you allowed to come in?" She said, "Yes, why not?" When you came inside, you saw that all the wood was indeed soaked. There were tears in the old woman's eyes. You closed your eyes and blew on the wood. As you watched, the wood dried up, although there was no heat from the sun and no fire had been lit. It was such a miracle that even a blind man could testify to it. The old woman said in surprise, "This is the effect of your prayer. Otherwise, it was impossible that the wood would have dried up so quickly. Rather, I would have had to throw it away." The man of God said, "And tell me, what is the use?" She said, "Now that you have done so much kindness, can you split these pieces of wood?" The man of God said with a smile, "Why, don't I have enough strength?" The old woman replied, "Why not? I have just seen your strength." The man of God split and cut the pieces of wood. The old woman was overjoyed. She thanked him and said, "Today you have solved a big problem of mine. May Allah reward you for it." The man of God said, "Come on, now I am going." While walking, the man of God suddenly remembered something. He stopped and said, "Can I ask you a question, if you don't mind?" The old woman said, "Ask, give orders." Allah said, "I saw that you had just come out of the house, asking people for help, but no one was listening to you. On the contrary, they were treating you badly. They were neither considering your age nor respecting you. Do you live here alone? Has your husband died?" The old woman changed the subject and said, "No, there is no such thing. People just do that." She was looking away and did not want to tell. Allah said softly, "Okay, if you don't want to tell, then there is no problem. I was just asking out of sympathy." Saying this, he came out. As soon as he reached the door, a woman who was passing by saw Allah coming out of the old woman's house and started shouting, "Hey villagers, look at this, it's too late." She said, "Oh, barren old woman, we know that you are not of good character. And now what was this old man, who has been camping here for who knows how long, doing in your house? That too alone, repent, repent. What a time has come. Look at the shamelessness at this age and in old age." These were people whose tongues were as long as a yard, and in whose hearts there was nothing but evil and sedition. When this woman made a noise, a crowd gathered there. The man of God calmly said, "Woman, what has happened to you? Don't accuse us of this dirty thing." The woman said in a sarcastic tone, "She is not a noble woman. Shall I tell you the truth about her? She was barren, and her husband divorced her and left her. She was also behind this divorce because she used to cheat on her husband and secretly do bad things. That is why her husband left her." She further said, "She has been alone for the last 30 years. No man wants to be with her because everyone hates her. When she goes out, no one helps her. She does all her work alone, and that is why we all stay away from her turmoil. Till yesterday we thought she was a barren woman, but today she proved what she is like." Then the woman started shouting and saying, when she saw that no man from the village was coming to her house, She called a stranger to her. And you went to her house. Tell me, what was she doing with you in her house at that age? That too alone. Hearing all of this, tears came to the old woman's eyes. Her character was being slandered. She was being slandered. Very base accusations were being made against her, and false stories were being attributed to her. The man of God felt very sad seeing and hearing all this. You knew that all these things that were based on lies and hatred, and if you wanted to, you could have silenced them all in one fell swoop, but the time had not yet come. You thought there is no use in arguing with people whose hearts and minds are covered with the moss of hatred. You did not answer and quietly went back and sat under the tree. There you again engaged in the remembrance of Allah, praying to Allah for guidance over the ignorance and hardness of these people. The old woman also went to her house, and the rush had ended, but that cunning woman was still not stopping talking badly about the Lord of Allah and this old woman. The Lord of Allah was very sad to see and hear all this. The old woman had not told you the truth, but from this woman's mouth you came to know the truth. The man of Allah began to pray, O Rahman, O Rahim, how many baseless accusations have the villagers made against this woman? What a great sin it is to point fingers at character. Having children or not is up to you, so why do we think it is the woman's fault? Why does a man leave a woman just because she is barren? Doesn't a man ever make a mistake? Is a man always chaste? Why does this society blame the woman? The man of Allah felt immense sympathy for this old woman. But since the people of the village kept pointing fingers at her, he thought that he should be more careful in front of them so that no one gets a chance to accuse a woman. The man of Allah was forgetting his own sorrow and feeling the sorrow of the old woman. This is the glory of the righteous servants of Allah, that they consider their own sorrows small and the sorrows of others big. He kept praying that Allah Almighty would make things easy for her. One day, a rude person in the village mocked him and said, "Old age is a great disease. When a person has neither a wife nor children, he is bound to fall into sins." You had already forgotten your sorrow, but these words revived the old wounds. A few days passed, and the good man came again. Seeing you upset, he asked, "Father, ever since you came here, you have been quiet, remembering Allah and not talking to anyone. How long have I been seeing you upset? Today I want to ask you something. Don't you have a wife or children? Don't you have anyone in this world?" The man of Allah had accepted him as his own because he was the only person in the village who respected and served him. The man of Allah said, "Son, I know how long this question has been in your heart. Today I will tell you what is in my heart." Then the man of Allah said, "Son, I have not married. If you don't have a wife, where will the children come from?" He looked at him in surprise and said, "Why?" The man of Allah said, "Because I was so immersed in the remembrance of Allah that my heart never wandered here and there in my youth." He said, "But Baba, you are very religious. Do you know that getting married is the sunnah of the Prophet?" The man of Allah replied, "Yes, it is the sunnah of my Prophet. But I was so lost in the remembrance of Allah that I felt that if I got married, I would fall into some responsibility that would hinder my worship. At night, I recite the Holy Quran, worship, fast during the day, and spend all my time in the remembrance of Allah. I was so lost in love with Him that I never thought about worldly matters." The man of Allah said, "Now my heart does not even think about anyone. Marriage is a great responsibility in which a woman has to take care of everything she does. It is not enough to say just 3 words of marriage, because marriage means 2 people loving each other, respecting each other, and having desire for each other. Husband and wife are each other's clothes, and it is important to protect the clothes. But in today's era, a person gets married, but often does not protect this clothes. Sometimes the husband is careless towards his wife, and sometimes the wife is careless towards her husband. That is why I did not get married, because I wanted to avoid anything that would hinder my worship and remembrance of Allah." The righteous person did not understand this statement of the man of Allah. He said, "But Baba, our religion has ordered us to get married so that the generation will continue. And along with that, we also have to do worship and other worldly things, which Allah Almighty has ordered us to do." The man of Allah replied with a smile, "Son, you are absolutely right. But the thing is that sometimes it happens that some things about a person are beyond the understanding of others. In our religion, monasticism does not mean cutting oneself off from the world and concentrating only on the remembrance of Allah. Rather, along with the rights of Allah, the rights of the servants are also necessary, and marriage is among these rights. Hearing this, the man was surprised. He said, Baba, why does this seem trivial to a good person like you? Then he asked another question. Baba, when I first asked why you have come to this village, you did not answer. But today I want to ask you because I consider you as my father and you consider me as your son. If you tell me, I will be very happy. The man of Allah thought for a while, then said, Come on, okay. Now it is time for me to tell you the truth. He began, In the old village, people used to make fun of me for not being able to have children, so I did not marry. But the real thing was something else, which I told you earlier. I believe that if I get married, Allah will definitely give me children. But people had forbidden me to live, and they taunted me for being barren. Finally, I was forced to leave that village. I started my journey hoping to find a village where I could find peace. And while traveling like this, I reached this village. This is my story. Saying this, the man of Allah fell silent, and the righteous man looked at him in surprise. The man of Allah said, And I sat under this tree, but the people here also started taunting me. Because of me, fingers are being pointed at an innocent woman, and she is being called bad names. Now I will have to leave this village too. But after completing some necessary work, everything happens in its own time. Hearing the words of the man of Allah, the heart of the righteous man was very sad. He thought, Why are these righteous people suffering everywhere? People have harassed them so much. Even my own family is bent on expelling them from here. But that won't happen with me. He said to the man of God, Father, you must be hungry. I will bring you bread. And saying this, he left from there. When he reached his house, he asked his wife to make 2 breads for the man of God. But his wife was a very impudent and bitter-tongued woman. She said angrily, For whom are you making breads? For those who are sitting under the tree. Then she said sarcastically, Well, so you have been giving breads to this old man for so many days. I am not going to give anything to this old man. The man asked in surprise, Why cry? She said, I myself saw this old man leaving the house of this barren, divorced, and wicked woman. That woman has been infamous from the beginning, and now this old man is also conspiring with her. That woman is still pretending to be a goddess of beauty, but all this will be of no use. If you don't have children in your youth, then no magic will work in your old age. The man got angry and started shouting, Are you conscious? Be careful. Fear Allah. They are the people of Allah, the guardians of Allah. How can you say such dirty things against them? How bad is it to call someone childless? And how can you slander someone like that? It's all in the hands of Allah. Nothing is in the hands of man. Then he added, Have you forgotten your situation? We didn't have any children for 15 years of our marriage. And then, through the prayers of a person of Allah, children came to our house. All this was the will of Allah, and the prayers of his guardian. His words silenced the wife, but she could not control her anger and left the room. The man was deeply saddened by his wife's attitude towards the people of Allah. The husband continued his speech and said, Those who prayed for us, Allah Almighty made us parents. Otherwise, you too would have been called barren today. Hearing this, the wife shouted, I was not barren. At least I became a mother. And I am not just talking about this woman, but also about this man whom you consider great. He himself is like that. The husband said in surprise, What do you want to say? The wife said angrily, I have heard everything. The story that this old man tells, the truth is that he himself is barren, and now he has gone to help this barren woman. I will make it known to the whole village that this man who worships Allah is doing here. I will get him out of here and kill him. Hearing this, the husband became very angry. He scolded his wife and said, Shut up. If you said such a thing about them, you do not know that these people of Allah are friends of Allah. Allah Almighty loves them very much, and do not let us be punished because of your such words. Believe me, don't forget to do this. The wife temporarily fell silent due to her husband's anger, but her heart was filled with hatred for the man of God. She started telling the women of the village behind her husband's back that the old woman and the man of God had an illicit relationship. Those women also started gossiping about her after hearing her, but God Almighty never likes it when someone accuses a good person. No matter how many conspiracies someone hatches, No one can go against the command of God, and the man of God obeys the command of God Almighty the most. One day the man of God was praying when he fell asleep. His teacher came to him in a dream and said, "O my disciple, marry this old woman who is said to be barren." Saying this, he left. When the man of God woke up in the morning, he considered this dream a sign and got busy in the remembrance of God. But he kept thinking in his heart, "Why did my teacher say this? That too at this age? Will I feel good about getting married in my old age? While I have spent my entire youth in the remembrance of Allah." He did not understand this. But when the same dream came again the next day, and the teacher again said, "Marry this old woman." When the man of Allah woke up in the morning, this thought disturbed his mind, and he began to pray the Fajr prayer. On the third day, when the same dream came, the man of Allah asked in his dream, "My teacher, why are you telling me to do this, when in my youth you had never ordered it?" His teacher replied, "Know and understand the truth that this marriage is being done to bring peace to a righteous soul. My son, you have not married all your life, and we did not say anything because your love for Allah was so great. But now baseless accusations are being made against you. This question is about your honor and also about the patience of this righteous woman. Her patience now deserves a sweet and pure fruit." Hearing this, the eyes of the man of God opened, and he fell into deep thought. The teacher of the man of God said in the dream, "This woman has not committed any sin, but has been punished for a sin she did not commit. People have made up wrong things about her, but the truth is that she has avoided bad deeds all her life. She could have done a lot if she wanted, but she kept herself safe. Everyone called her husband good, but he was not a noble person at all. He was very cruel who beat her. This woman spent her entire youth patiently, never saying anything, never complaining. She is a virtuous servant who prays to God every day to grant her children. But the people of the village have followed her and are spreading strange things. Everyone considers her a contagion. Now, for the honor of this woman and for the sake of her pure soul, you must marry her. This is the command of Allah." The man of Allah said in the dream, "Hazrat, what will people say if I get married at this age?" The teacher replied, "Let people say, this is the command of Allah, and you have to obey it. This marriage is a reward for the patience of this good soul and a means of restoring your honor." Understanding this, the man of Allah became convinced that this command was from Allah. He obeyed his teacher's command and said from his heart, "Whatever you say, I will do." After offering the Fajr prayer, the man of Allah prayed and went towards the old woman's house. He knocked on the door. The old woman's voice came from inside. "Who is it?" The man of Allah said, "I am the same person who used to sit under the tree, whom you called for help." The old woman immediately opened the door and said, "Can you come in?" The man of Allah replied, "Yes, why not?" He came in and sat down to one side. He said, "Bibi, I want to talk to you about something." He hesitated a little while saying this, but finally he said, "I have received orders from Allah in my dream 3 times. My teacher has given me this order, and I want you to obey me too." The old woman said in surprise, "What do you mean?" "I am ready to obey everything you say because you have treated me very well. This is the first time I have seen a man who respects a woman and speaks with his eyes lowered." The man of Allah said with a low look, "I want to marry you. You." The man of Allah said, "What do you think?" The old woman was silent for a moment after hearing the marriage. Then she said, "If this is Allah's order, then I am satisfied." The man of Allah asked, "Do you have any objection or any condition?" The old woman said, "What condition? I have spent my entire life like this, searching for a good person. Otherwise, I would have left this world like this, thinking that there is no one here for me. But if Allah Almighty has written marriage in my destiny at this old age, then why shouldn't I definitely do this lawful thing? That too by the will of Allah, to whose command my head is bowed and will remain bowed. Good people like you are only found by those who are lucky." Hearing this, the man of Allah smiled and thought in his heart that the thought that had never crossed his mind. Almighty put that thought in an instant, because Allah Almighty does and makes everything happen. It is said that couples are made in heaven, so this couple was also made in heaven, and it was only a short time before they met. The man of Allah married the old woman. This marriage took place for the pleasure and happiness of Allah, and such a marriage is extremely blessed. Now the man of Allah and the old woman started living together. This was a great joy for the old woman, because she had never had such joy in her entire life. The biggest thing was that her husband was a worshiper. The man of Allah was also very calm, because he had always not married out of fear that his wife might hinder his worship. But this wife was such that she herself read the Holy Quran, fasted, and worshipped Allah all night. Both of them were busy pleasing the Almighty Lord together. This was the couple who set an example for the people of paradise. When the villagers came to know that the man of Allah had married this old woman, they started making strange things. Most of the blame was on the old woman because, as always, the woman was the one who was put in the dock of blame. The woman who had been abandoned by her husband was already infamous in the eyes of the villagers. But for the old woman, this marriage was the beginning of a new life and happiness. The man of Allah and she both became helpers in worshiping each other. Love for Allah and enmity for Allah, these are both qualities that Allah loves very much. But the women of the village were still ready to attack him because their hearts were filled with jealousy and hatred. But the marriage that takes place by the will of Allah has no effect on worldly matters. One day a woman came to the old woman's house and said with a mocking laugh, "Oh, old woman, what is the point of getting married at this old age? When you know that your first husband pushed you away because you were barren, aren't you ashamed? Will you have children now?" Hearing the meaningless talk of these women, the people of Allah who were sitting inside were forced to come out. They said in a glorious tone, "Even what you cannot even imagine will happen. Is this a written order of barren? Having children or not is not in anyone's control. And those who have children should not think that all this is theirs. All this belongs to Allah, this life, this wealth, and these children. Don't be arrogant, otherwise everything will be taken away. And remember, don't say anything to this woman now, because I am her husband. Take care of yourself, not us." One of the women, who was the apparent wife of this righteous man, said sarcastically, "Well, that's right, we also want to see how many children those whose feet are hanging in the grave produce." The other woman laughed and said, "Yes, they will have one child in a year." Hearing this, all the women started laughing. The man of Allah was in a state of glory. He said loudly, "I have no status, but if you are talking about the will of Allah, then listen. If Allah wills, He will bless me and my wife with 200 children. This is my faith. Nothing is impossible for the Lord who can create the earth and the heavens in 6 days. Where have you understood the power of the Lord yet? My trust in Allah will never be broken." Seeing the glory of the man of Allah, those women trembled. No words came out of their mouths, and they left there silently. Time passed. People kept criticizing the man of Allah and his wife. But this relationship was a pure one. Marriage is pleasing to Allah, and this marriage was for the pleasure of Allah. Satan always hates marriage, but Allah makes marriage a source of blessing. The man of Allah did all the work of his house and treated his wife like a queen. The old woman did not go out of the house, nor did she do any kind of work. The man of Allah was fulfilling all the duties of her husband with joy. The old woman kept thanking Allah that she was blessed with such a husband at that age, who respected her at all times and was busy in the worship of Allah. The villagers were jealous and kept making excuses, but when a man's name is associated with a woman, people's tongues become silent. Still, this was a coincidence, and Allah showed His power in it. One day when the entire village was in a sleep of heedlessness, as the morning dawn spread, the voice of a child was heard in the ears of the villagers. This voice was echoing throughout the village. Everyone was surprised and anxious as to whose house this child had been born. Soon the news spread in the village that a son had been born in the house of the man of God. The same woman who had earlier mocked came running and started seeing with her own eyes. She could not believe her eyes that how such an old woman could have a child. This was a great miracle of God's power, which was beyond anyone's imagination. When the old woman gave birth to a healthy son in her old age, the ears of the villagers started ringing. People started saying in surprise, "How did this happen? This old man has done some magic. Anyway, he seems to be some kind of almighty Baba." It became difficult for the people to digest that this old woman had a son. They started to find out how this was possible, but their surprise did not end there. Every day, the sound of a new child began to echo in the village. Similarly, one after another, children were born. The man of God and his wife had 200 children, both sons and daughters. The people saw all this with their own eyes, and they were amazed. The most amazing thing was that these children were born from the body of a woman who was considered barren by the people, who was over 80 years old. But with the birth of each child, the woman became younger and more beautiful. The women who had previously made fun of her and taunted her came to their senses. The barren and divorced woman was not only married, but also had children, and had become the youngest and most beautiful woman in the village. But these people were still not ashamed of what they had done, especially the wife of this righteous man, who still did not believe these things. Her husband said, "Do you see how Allah has blessed those whom you have spoken ill of? Allah has given them so many children, and has also made them young." The wife said angrily, "You always take sides with them, and you will continue to do so. I don't believe it. I said it before, and I still say it. This man has done magic. Otherwise, how could it be that a 90-year-old woman becomes a young woman and gives birth to 101 children?" The husband replied, "Whether you believe it or not, the truth does not change. Allah blesses whom He wills." But the woman still did not stop. She went to the villagers and started spreading evil. She shouted, "Villagers, listen, this magician has done magic on all of us. He wants to take over our entire village through his children. If we do not get him out of here, our boat will sink." This was the same village that was saved from a huge storm by the prayers of Allah. The storm which stopped by the will of Allah due to the blessings of Allah. But the people were not giving up their ignorance and stubbornness. They kept accusing the saint of Allah, without understanding the fact that no one can do anything against the will and power of Allah. They were not reformers. Their stubbornness, ignorance, and misguidance invited the wrath of Allah Almighty. Allah Almighty had now decided to punish them. One night, this woman gathered the entire village and started pelting stones at the door of the saint of Allah. She was shouting, "Come out with your wife and go away from here. We don't want you and your children. Anyway, we were defeated by this woman, and now you are also beating our chests." The villagers agreed with her and said, "Yes, she is right. We will not allow such a magician to live in our village." They started raining stones on the door of the saint of Allah, but Allah Almighty immediately revealed His wrath. A terrible storm came, and the same stones that were being pelted at the door of the saint of Allah turned upside down and fell on the heads of these people. Their heads started to explode from the impact of the stones, and they ended up there. The man of Allah said to the righteous man, "I am very sorry that your wife also ended up in this storm." The man replied calmly, "Hazrat, she was the one who spread all this evil. Why didn't she get punished for her actions? Bad endings always result from bad deeds. Allah Almighty was angry with her, and she could have become a source of hell for me. I am happy that I supported you, and I will continue to support you in the future." Now the villagers were dead, and only the man of Allah, his wife, and his 200 children were left in the village. Allah Almighty protected His saint, because nothing can harm the one who is beloved to Allah. The descendants of the man of Allah were to exalt the name of Islam. That was the reason why Allah Almighty blessed him with 200 children, which was a miracle. So friends, you have seen that when Allah Almighty comes to perform a miracle, everyone's mind is stunned. That is why I believe in Allah, because He is the greatest helper. I hope you like this story. Believe in the miracles of Allah Almighty and always keep your hopes attached to Him.